Hi, welcome to another edition of In the Studio with Calamity Jane. My name is Jody, also known as Calamity Jane. Our purpose with this series is to take women doing amazing things in our community and give them the spotlight for a moment. Joining me today is Jane Heenan from Gender Justice Nevada. Welcome to the show, Jane.
Thank you so much for having me, Jody, and it's a great pleasure to meet you this morning.
Tell us a little bit about Gender Justice Nevada.
So the group of us that come together in 2011, maybe haphazardly and in different ways, kind of trying to find our way, is I think really a fierce and loving group of folks hoping to co-create change in the context of sex gender in Nevada, and I would say maybe in places beyond Nevada, in areas of public policy and offering direct services. It's a wonderful kind of combination of public policy and direct services work. It's very rare, actually, in the United States, as I'm understanding it, for groups such as ours to really exist in that way, in that kind of combined way. We offer counseling. We offer a hotline, 24/7 hotline. We offer lots of groups. We are engaged in school advocacy. We've played a primary role in supporting Clark County School District to make a change in the way that they're taking care of young persons in schools, and also at the state level in the passage of a bill known as SB 225 in 2017, which mandates all Nevada school districts to have policy and training about sex gender diverse students. We do document changes mostly for free. We are engaged in grassroots organizing. We have, maybe as one of our primary goals in the 2019 legislature, is to end a horrific practice that I call intersex genital mutilation, where babies are subject to medically unnecessary surgeries because their genitalia don't fit cultural expectations of what should look right, among other kinds of things that I don't know, we're engaged in and hopeful to continue to move towards.
How did you come to get started with the sex gender diversity movement?
Yeah, I love the wonderfully broad question, right? Like I've called myself an accidental activist for a long time. I self-identify as a snowflake. My pronouns are they, them, their. And actually, if I could kind of sideline for a moment your introduction, you're saying, well, oh, this is a show for spotlighting women in Las Vegas, and good for you to think about those things as you want, I guess. But I certainly am not self-identifying as a woman, and in my journey, in particular, and sitting with persons in counseling, and I've had this privilege over almost 20 years to sit with thousands of persons in counseling, the unconscious sort of reactionary belief in the sex gender binary that everybody is born a boy or a girl, and those labels are, well, I don't know, those are just neutral or objective, that they're honest and loving, and that they don't have to do with sort of the cultural expectations, but rather having to do with something internal or inherent in a human being. Those are really hurtful beliefs. That's a very I don't know, I would even call it a lethal narrative that we're born into. And so if for me, even in sitting here, it's kind of challenging to hear that language. I tell you that in an answer really to your question also, how do I come to these things? I just started asking questions. I guess I started asking questions about myself, who am I in the context of sex gender is not a question that most people are asking once they're 5 or 6 years old, but I persisted in asking that kind of question about myself. I continued to kind of grapple with increasingly complex forms of how am I in the world, and who do I want to be, and these sorts of things. I came to understand, and I mean, I understand this for myself, but I think it's true for us all. Well, I'm alive, and so I'm growing and changing in all of these ways, including in the context of sex gender. So to say that I am a static label woman is not really accurate. I did make changes in my life in the context of sex gender like 20 some odd years ago. And there was a time in my life when I thought like, oh, I was born in the wrong body, or I was a woman, or these kinds of things, because I was labeled a boy at birth. But again, my experience over time, in particular in learning from others and engaging in the dialogue that emerges in counseling in my practice, that like those stories really are hurtful, that no one can be born in the wrong body. I am my body. There's no way for me to be otherwise, and that's really a consequence of about 100 years of medical and psychological professionals requiring me to answer their question about why I exist, and that somehow I have to make myself plain or clear to those who would otherwise say like, well, you don't count. And so I have to sort of tell this story about being in the wrong body, because then people are like, well, that's kind of confusing, but I guess that kind of makes sense. So I'll give you a pass. You were born in the wrong body. Now you're making changes in your body. Doesn't it feel good to be in the right body now? But rather, and as that story comes to be, I take on the weight of the cultural silence about these things, and that kind of violence that emerges out of that silence becomes mine internally to have to grapple with. And I blame myself for not being okay enough, like for being a birth defect or for being disordered, or there are other words like dysphoria that are more often being shared these days. And I refuse to submit to that kind of hurtful narrative. And really that's directly connected to the things that are happening with gender justice Nevada. As I was in grad school at UNLV in the late 1990s in marriage and family therapy, I had a privilege of starting to facilitate group space for what I would call back then transgender persons. I learned along the way that like my stories, my experiences of violence, of being violated, were everybody's stories. And while I sort of knew that intellectually, it was totally different to encounter that viscerally each week in that group, and then in the sessions that I would sit with individuals and couples and families in, I was not willing to just sort of like say, well, okay, we're all sharing these stories. Isn't it great that we can just talk about these stories? I wanted to act. I believe that, I don't know, each of us has power. I think we all have responsibilities to engage together in trying to co-create healthy change. And so we started a little group back then and tried this and that thing. But it was many years later in 2011 when at the state level we got past protections that included the language gender identity or expression in basic civil rights laws, employment, public accommodations, and housing, that somebody, when I went up for the bill signing up in Carson City, and Governor Sandoval was very generous in inviting me and us to come and share that space, that somebody afterwards, while I was sipping a martini in Carson at a little bar, was like, well, you know, Jane, like that's just words on a page. You know that we need to do more. Like we should start a nonprofit or whatever. And I was like, okay. I mean, I wasn't intending that. I thought like with the passage of these bills, over a decade of kind of service or whatever that I had offered was sort of maybe coming to a close, and my partner and I were going to move out of state. But I knew immediately that something had shifted in me. And while I had thought about that, I hadn't considered it in a way that person was provoking me to reflect on it. And so a few days later, I talked to my partner and I was like, we're going to move and all of that stuff, but can we stick around? I maybe want to start something in this sort of way. So again, it's been a long journey from 2011 to now, and I'm really proud of who we are. I think that the honesty and the integrity with which we carry ourselves is, I don't know, is kind of rare. Maybe there's some arrogance in that, and excuse me if that is, but there is. But I really think that who we are together is different than maybe many groups like ours are. And I really, my vision or our vision is not to be exclusionary, is not to sort of say like we serve these kind of people and not those kind of people, and that the language sex, gender, diverse families and communities is an outgrowth of that kind of consciousness and the dialogues, and that that phrasing for me is inclusive of what people would call maybe these days the LGBT community, or if persons are particularly like kind of well informed, they might say LGBTQ or LGBTQ plus or LGBTQIA, to positive, like there are a lot of ways maybe to define that, like kind of, I don't think it's definable, but to try and define that group of persons, but that all of us who are in non-dominant positions under the sex gender binary, and that's a larger group, really, that's really our mission. So we offer groups for sex workers. We are consciously inclusive of kinky people and people in BDSM relationships, of polyamorous persons and persons in consensual non-monogamous kinds of relationships. Like love is okay and healthy as long as it's consensual, and it's beautiful for us to come together in these kinds of ways. And the energy that is emerging as a result of this kind of openness and the directions we're sort of organically moving into really are beautiful.
What do you feel makes you successful?
Wow, what a great question, huh? Like everybody wants to be successful, right? Like I've been chewing on that question maybe for a long time. When I was younger, like it filled me with fear because somehow I was supposed to achieve. Somehow I was supposed to make my way and make a name for myself, and like I had no idea what that meant. I was in school and it seemed like school was supposed to be the kind of the gateway to these things, but like I would tell you these days in my life, and probably for a long time, maybe even for I don't know, over 20 years, like I'm trying not to be successful. I don't want to achieve in the ways that, like, I don't know, what I think of as serve the machine or service the machine. I want to have honest relationships. And while maybe some people would say like, oh, that's like successful or whatever, it's much different than like making money or like, you know, being like well known or like doing things that seem to make a difference in other people's lives. Like I'm kind of selfish. I want to have like in a healthy relationship, like reciprocal love and trust and respect and honesty and taking good risks together. And I want to, I guess I want to unlearn. I want to remember. I think for myself, a lot of the ways that I was socialized to understand, like, I don't know, the so-called real world really are not healthy. I don't really recognize myself in a lot of the ways that other people are engaged in their lives or going about like kind of making their way. And I respect that. I'm not trying to call anybody out, but for me, I want to remember that Mother Earth is generous and that it's not a circumstance in which I am like in a struggle for scarce resources and some kind of competition. I'm really, I don't know. I hate hierarchies and other forms that sort of like privilege some at the expense of many. In various ways, maybe I'm like not wanting to be successful. I have a healthy relationship that has existed over 27 years with my partner, which is quite a story in and of itself. We share space with doggies and in various kinds of packs over the years. I'm really grateful to have a practice in psychotherapy, which is central in my life in so many ways. The amazing privilege it is to sit with people who are in various ways exploring their experiences and the opportunity to be invited into different families and to meet young people and older people, and it's just really quite extraordinary. But I, you know, the whole experience of maybe being invited to participate in co-creating a nonprofit, that's about as close to sort of like trying to be successful as I've ever gotten. And really, that's really been very scary for me. And I think in the main, honestly, Jody, that my presence has guided us, because I tend to have some influence over things, for better or worse. But like my influence has guided us to both be healthier. I was saying maybe some of this earlier about like I think we do things differently in many ways that have to do with aliveness, but it's also caused us a lot of trouble in terms of like fundraising and structure and I don't know, sort of like following the rules and we have some of these sort of like real world problems that a nonprofit has to deal with because of the law and other aspects of how we are together as civilized people. So, yeah.
What one piece of advice would you give to somebody who's maybe grappling with issues with sex gender diversity?
So I would say fundamentally to trust yourself and to recognize that the stories that are around you and nearby you that like maybe invite you into different possible futures in some or many ways are not so healthy, and to challenge those stories, to come together with others to talk about how to challenge those stories. That, for instance, like you're not bad or broken, you're not an abomination unto the Lord, you're not born into the wrong body, you're not disordered. The power and the pressure of others to cause us to conform in the context of sex gender is profound. Everybody is struggling with sex gender identity, so you're not alone. Even if most people don't seem to acknowledge their struggle with it, and they tend to conform more often or seemingly more easily than you do, I would say that you have gifts to offer, and that you're a prophet. It's a word that I offer with consciousness and thoughtfulness, that your message is a message of hope and a challenge to change so that we can come together in healthier ways. And it is, I think, maybe eternally true, at least as I understand the ways that we tell history, that prophets are maybe not so well respected in their time, but are, upon reflection, maybe recognized as having the kind of power to lead others in, again, what I would say are healthier directions, and that your presence in the world is indeed a gift to us all.
What is your favorite word?
Fuck.
Just one?
If those people who know me would tell you that that's the word that more often than any other is coming out of me.
What is your least favorite word?
Can I have three?
Sure.
So here are three of my least favorite words, or maybe my three least favorite words: violence, guns, money.
What turns you on, creatively, emotionally, or spiritually?
Diversity, difference. Like, I don't know, when I'm listening to music, like I can't listen to the same, like there are all these genres in music, right? Like you just listen to country or you listen to this, like I need that kind of like, that playful sort of like difference and diversity and challenge.
What turns you off?
Violence. Violence, which is another way maybe of saying a lot of things that maybe wouldn't be understood as violence, labeling babies, forcing people to conform, judgment in a way that is meant to control. There are two good things, or there are two things that maybe for me are meaningful, like in terms of sort of guiding my journey. Like, violence is bad, love is good. That's like it.
What is your favorite curse word?
Fuck, 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 fuck. That's my favorite curse word.
What sound or noise do you love?
Many. I don't know that there's a sound that I don't love, really. And what comes to me right now is the sound of water in motion. Maybe people would say waves, but even maybe like the passing of a river or the kind of the trundling of a stream. Water in motion.
What sound or noise do you hate?
The sound of no. The sound of the judgmental, shaming no.
What profession, other than your own, would you like to someday attempt?
So that's a curious question for me, because like I am trying to unlearn, as maybe I was saying earlier, and kind of remember, and professions and all of that other sort of structure for me is is not really what I am seeking. I could answer like, oh, like archaeology, or maybe like theoretical physicist or something like that, or I don't know what philosopher means. I think we're all philosophers, but really like I want to be a generalist. I believe that life well lived is in that kind of jack of all trades, or just sort of knowing, not knowing everything as if like there was a concrete kind of knowing, but like kind of having a sense of playful confidence in engaging in everything.
What profession would you never want to attempt?
Well, there are a lot. Maybe I would not want to do any profession, really, like I'm saying. Like, I don't know how come they gave me a license to practice marriage and family therapy. I thought a long time ago that, like, the only way I could do that was to get a license and to be formally educated, have a degree, pass a test, all of that stuff. That's not true. People come and sit with me because they want to come and sit with me. It has nothing to do with my license. People come back to sit with me because they want to come back and sit with me. And it has nothing to do with me being a professional. I really want to be the anti-professional. So that's how I would say, although there are many kinds of professions that I think are really, I don't know, revolting to me. And if you want me to say more about that, I will, but yeah.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
I hope that whatever that like would be would sound something like go to hell. In the end, for me, like if that sort of story, as I understand it, being raised Catholic, is true, that like heaven is eternal and hell is eternal, there's no difference, because an eternity is an awfully long time, and what seems pleasurable for a while soon turns to be something that is hellish, and whatever seems painful over time, there are gifts that are found there. And so it makes no difference to me.
Thanks for being with us today, Jane.
I can't thank you enough for this opportunity. I really appreciate the engaged dialogue, and I'm very excited about what may be to come in our relationship.
Awesome. And thank you for joining us. Join us for the next edition of In the Studio with Calamity Jane, where we put another amazing person from Las Vegas in the spotlight.